Hey guys, Trevor with Shadow Systems. Welcome to our video about slide disassembly. First, a word of warning. This is really intended for those of you that are comfortable doing this kind of work, who have reviewed the video and feel like this is something you can easily do. If you're concerned at all, please take the gun to a gunsmith, or by all means, you can send it to us for repair. Okay, so here we have a flat dark earth MR920, and we're going to disassemble the slide. This gun is an optics ready gun, so it has the cover plate covering our optic system. So I will show you the additional steps required to take this version apart. However, if you are taking apart a non-optic gun, as a general statement, it's about the same. There's one or two little differences which I will mention. Okay, first step, of course, make sure your gun is clear and disassemble as you normally would. We'll set the frame aside for now. Okay, this is the standard field strip procedure. So you're going to lift up on the recoil rod and you're going to take out the barrel. This one is threaded, so we need to remove our thread protector first, and then out comes the barrel. Great. Okay, strip slide, totally filthy. You'll have to forgive me. This is a gun that went to the range recently. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove the striker assembly. And some people do replace their strikers. It is an item that can wear out. And so this would be what you would need to do to remove that. The tool that I'll be using is a 3/32 inch punch. But you know, a kind of any like pointy tool, if it's reasonably strong, can do a lot of these disassembly steps. Okay, so we're going to look for the spacer sleeve. On this gun, it is a black spacer sleeve. However, it could also be gray. And what we're trying to do is place our tool between the back of the striker and that plastic spacer sleeve. And we're going to apply downward pressure on the spacer sleeve and compress the firing pin spring just a little tiny bit. And as soon as we do that, the rear cover plate can come off. Now, word of warning, when you remove this, you're going to want to slide your finger over it like this, because that's going to catch any springs that might want to shoot out of the back of the slide. So we're applying downward pressure on that spacer sleeve, and then you can see already that's starting to move as I slide it forward, and I'm going to slide it forward with my thumb over the back of the slide. So I can remove my slide cover plate, and now removing the striker is as simple as lifting it up and out of the back of the slide. Okay, if you have a non-optic gun, you're also going to have the extractor depressor plunger assembly come out of this smaller hole, okay, to the side. But this is an optic ready gun, and so that plunger assembly is actually going to come out to the front, as you'll see in a moment. You'll need to remove your optic or your cover plate to disassemble the extractor and the depressor plunger. And so you'll use a T10 Torx to remove those items. Okay, so for reference, we torque these screws to 10 inch-pounds, and there goes one. And we also use a blue Loctite. So if you have blue Loctite, that would be our preference. The Loctite 243 that comes with the gun is a little more viscous, and it is less likely to kind of run down into the internal components of the slide. Okay, so I have removed the cover plate, and now I can see the depressor plunger assembly through this slot right here. And that slot allows me to look at and see the position of the spring and potentially manipulate its location. The tensioning pin at the back of the slot is what is actually holding that entire assembly together. And the backstrap disassembly tool that came with your gun should fit into a small hole on the bottom of the slide. You'll see this little tiny hole next to the rail, the smallest one you can see, and that is where you would place your backstrap disassembly tool to force out the pin. So I'll put my hand under the slide and I'll just push down, and I've removed that little pin. The tool is now all the way through the slide, and I can now remove it. So I'll pull the tool out. Now the depressor plunger assembly is no longer under spring tension, and I can begin to remove the other components in the slide. The firing pin safety is located on the bottom of the slide. Okay, it is helping to retain the extractor right now. So I'm going to apply pressure on the firing pin safety. I'm going to hold it down, and that will allow me to manipulate the extractor out of its slot. Now, in some cases, you might need to use this slot on the top to kind of push your depressor plunger back a little bit to free up the extractor, but the extractor comes out from the side. So I'm going to do that now. And then there's the extractor, okay? As soon as you remove the extractor, maintain your thumb pressure on the bottom because now this is gonna wanna come out as well, okay? And you should have spring, boy, that gun's filthy. You should have spring and firing pin safety come out the bottom. The last step is to remove the depressor plunger from the front, okay? So we're gonna, again, use that access slot and give it a little push, and you'll see it's now emerging in the extractor slot on the side of the slide. We can now remove that as well. Okay, so the slide is fully stripped minus the sights at this point, so you should be able to replace components as needed. Now we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna reassemble. Okay, so we're gonna essentially be doing this in reverse order. The first thing is to put that depressor plunger back in. This is really important. One side of the depressor plunger has a little plastic bearing on it, and the other side has a metal depressor plunger on it. And that metal component is what needs to be in contact with the extractor. So to say it another way, when you put this component in, you want the big end toward the muzzle, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and put it back in its little hole right here, and I'm gonna use my tool or the tool of your choice to just kind of move it back a little bit and create some space, okay? Next, I'm gonna put my spring in my safety. Now, I will say this, when they get worn a little bit, sometimes the spring will come out. That's okay, it doesn't really matter. You just need to make sure that when you put it in, the spring stays upright inside of the safety, okay? So I'm gonna take my spring and safety assembly, and I'm gonna insert it from below the slide. And as you insert it, you can look in the extractor notch and actually just confirm that that spring is staying upright. It's a way of checking to make sure that it's in position. If the spring turns sideways, it can cause some problems. So you just want to make sure that it actually is it stays in that upright position. I sometimes hold the slide sort of in a horizontal fashion as I install it. Okay, so I'm going to apply some pressure from the underside with my finger to hold it down. And then I should be able to put my extractor right back in where it came from. So it is now holding everything in place, okay? So it is blocking the egress of the depressor plunger, and it is also locking the firing pin safety in place, all right? So now you can, there's a variety of ways of doing this, but you can use kind of any long tool in the back of the slide to push this plunger forward and compress it so you can install the tensioning pin. You can also use a small screwdriver, like an eyeglass screwdriver, to grab the back of the depressor plunger spring and pull it forward. But your goal is to compress it enough to get the tensioning pin started into the hole, okay? So I'm gonna insert the tool from the back, and you'll notice that I'm now compressing that spring from behind. Okay, so I'm gonna do it at the table here because it's kind of hard to hold it and do it. But I'm taking my pin and I'm putting it in part way so it sort of stops about like that, okay? And then I'll take my tool and push again, and at that point I can seat the pin. Make sure you use your tool to push it all the way into position, like that, like that. Okay, it should be below the surface of your optic cut. Okay? All right, so we've actually done all the hard work. Now it's pretty easy. We're going to just insert our firing pin assembly straightforward. A word of caution, when you look at your the end of your firing pin where it contacts your spring cups, you can see at a certain point the spring ends, and you'll see the cut end of the spring. Make sure that that cut end doesn't fall directly on the dividing line between the two halves of the spring cups. So the spring cups are two halves like this, and we want our spring to fall somewhere in the middle, never at the break, because it can cause some misalignment. So we'll insert our firing pin assembly into the back of the slide. You'll need to make sure it's all the way seated in there and as far down as it will go. If you have an optic or a non-optic slide, you'll also put your depressor plunger in from the back, not from the front like we did last time. And we'll start our cover plate like that. You'll use either if it's an optic slide, you can just use your thumb, but you'll use a tool to essentially hold that firing pin assembly down under spring pressure and get your cover plate started, and then it will click in place, okay? Lastly, you can either reinstall your cover plate or your optic. Again, we recommend a little bit of blue Loctite, and you'll want to do about 10 inch-pounds, which, for reference, if you're doing it manually, is tight, but not insanely tight. So just, you can see the tool isn't really applying that much torque. Okay, And then of course there's one more screw. So that is how you disassemble and reassemble a slide. I hope that's helpful. As a reminder, if you're not confident, don't do it. By all means, give us a call if you need some help. Thanks so much.